head of Melanson and Heath that one of the principals can't make.
Oh, you actually,
Are we on, Jeff? All right. Well, I just waved. Yeah, I know. We're assuming we're on?
Yeah, it took them a while.
Yeah, it looks like we're on. All right. Good evening. Time is a little after 7 o'clock on Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. I'd like to call tonight's Selectmen's meeting to order. As usual, I would ask everyone in the audience, please join in us for the Pledge Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have public forum, limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate individuals' rights. Is there anyone here this evening for public forum? All right, seeing none, why don't we deal with the minutes from our last meeting?
Hang on, I need a date. Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the minutes from the Board of Selectmen's meeting of February 6th, 2018 as presented.
Second?
Hearing a motion and second. Anyone have any comments, questions? All those in favor of the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0.
I was not here.
3-0 with one abstention. Thank you, John. Didn't mean to put words in your mouth. All right, so next up, we have public hearing. Poll hearing in regards to a relocation of a pole on Town Farm Road. I believe the clerk has to call the special hearing, or at least read the description.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As advertised in the, hold on, technology problem.
Telegram, I guess.
There's a ghost in the machine. Thank you. Who needs technology? As advertised in the February 12th, 2018 Telegram and Gazette, Town of Sutton Board of Selectmen. Public hearing notice. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 166, Section 22, you are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held at 7 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday, February 20th, 2018, in the Sutton Town Hall upon petition from National Grid for permission to install one jointly owned pole on Town Farm Road, beginning at a point approximately 1,680 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Lovett Road and Town Farm Road, and continuing approximately 25 feet in a westerly direction. National Grid to install a new 35C3 riser pole, anchor and guy wire in the public way to service new cell tower at 154 Town Farm Road, new pole number 25-1. Petitioner agrees to reserve space for one cross arm at a suitable point on each of said poles for the fire, police, telephone, and telegraph signal wires belonging to the municipality and used exclusively for municipal purposes, all to be erected in accordance with plan filed Town Farm Road, Sutton, Massachusetts. Plan file herewith marked N-Grid number 236-33393.
Thank you very much. Jim, can you tell us a little bit about this poll hearing?
Well, first of all, the police, fire, and highway had no issue with this. Matt Belcito actually went out to the site with National Grid engineer to determine that the pole wasn't within the right-of-way and access to the rear of the property, and it wasn't. So this is essentially the power that we need to run the cell tower that we've all been hoping for. And this is a positive. I think it'll be an additional 4 to 6 weeks before they actually get the power, and then I don't know the process from there. But Verizon was the last notice we got from John Arthur. This was the last thing that Verizon was waiting for, was power to run their equipment and power their site. So it appears that the cell tower is closer now than ever, especially if this pole gets approved and gets erected shortly.
All right, perfect. Seeing how we have to have an open hearing, I'll declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to talk about this? Present?
I'm from National Grid, but I'm the gentleman that met with the fire chief the other day.
All right, then why don't you come up and just introduce yourself? Just introduce yourself to the community.
My name is Darrell Harvey. I'm
Okay.
the engineer that took over for the old engineer that designed this project.
All right.
Yeah, obviously the pole has to be installed so we can bring power across the street all the lines are on the other side of the road at this time, so we just need one single pole as a riser pole. Then we're gonna go underground back to the cell tower. That's probably about 1,000 feet in the back of that farm.
Right. And the conduit's already been laid.
What?
The conduit.
Yeah, most of it has. I think they've gotten the back half done, but not to what we we didn't have the pole marked yet, so they haven't, I think, dug the conduit back to where the pole's going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's everything's there though. The pad, manholes, everything. Most of their conduit's done. Their transformer pad and the tower's obviously there.
Great.
You know, so.
All right, fantastic. If you don't mind, I'd like to open it up to the board, see if
they have
anyone has any questions or
I'll be glad
comments.
to answer since I've been out there a few times.
Great, thank you. John?
Just one thing, this is a very welcomed poll hearing.
Yeah, I figured that. I've been told. When the fire chief meets you out there and says, "Hey, it's okay," I think I'm in good shape.
All set.
Oh, thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I'm all set. Last thing I want to do is get in the way of this, so, thank you.
Well said, well said. Mike?
Yeah, I thought you'd recognize me dressed as the chief, but
Oh, that's right.
No.
That's not you. Yeah, it wasn't. That was a big man. I know him. Very tall man.
Start digging. No, I don't. How 4 to 6 weeks is that typically? what you
Maybe
guys-
it depends. I think they're going to try to stop pushing this one. We have a liaison, Kevin Shaughnessy,
Yeah.
that deals with the town. We're trying to get this thing going for you, because right now, as it stands, the pre-check guys went out there to check all the underground, and right now it was kind of underwater. So they said they wouldn't be able to get that part done until they get to either pump that out and the weather dries a little bit, so they can start laying wire and obviously the transformer on the pad. But the pole should take 4 to 6 weeks tops, I hope.
Excellent.
The designs, everything's done on it. I just approved the design this morning to finish it up, and now this is it.
Great.
You know?
I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because definitely I'm going to agree with
Yeah, I don't wanna
my
add-
colleagues.
wanna
Yeah,
create
yeah,
more
we
questions.
want to get this done, but I only have one minor one. This is going to be an aerial crossing, right? It's not going to go under the road?
Yes, no, we can't. We won't allow that because
Okay.
we won't. We don't want to have to maintain primary that's under the road.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
makes
why
sense.
we're going across and then underground after that.
Perfect,
You know,
perfect. That's the only question that I had.
That was the reasoning not to just go across under the road.
Well,
and then
because
go
the existing power right now is across the street.
Yeah.
So all those, it's a single phase line, not 3-phase. So it's just one line going across the poles on the other side of the road. Instead of trying to go under, we're not going to dig up the road to do that. So we always bring a riser pole across the street, with an anchoring guy, and then they they bring the wire up to the pole and then go underground from there.
Excellent.
Pretty
Thank
simple. And then it saves a lot of aggravation.
you. Yeah.
I like those two words, saving aggravation and
Yes. I mean,
simple.
look, hey,
That's
listen,
perfect.
I just did the design for the police station, the new police station too.
Oh,
They wanted to go under the road for that. I was like, oh, we can't do that. We don't like to maintain wireless. Something happens, somebody hits that pole, you're gonna have an outage for a while too. It's much easier to repair primary going above across the road than it is underneath it.
all right, that makes
so-
perfect sense.
It gives
All right.
my son some work, he's a linesman,
Yeah,
so
is he?
gets
Is he?
called out.
Hey, those guys know what they're doing. I just, I put it all together and they tell me what I should have done.
John, you don't go driving aiming for poles, do you?
Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to ask, I know it's a public hearing, is there anyone here that would like to offer any comments in the audience? All right, I'd entertain a motion to close the poll hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. And now I would entertain a motion in regards to the poll movement.
Actually, there's no pole.
Well, we have an agenda item, just a motion.
Oh, it's the same part of it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a brand new pole. I don't know about relocation. I heard you say relocation on something, and I think we're just adding one pole.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, the pole across the street that we're using is staying where it is. It's just getting replaced, which we're allowed to do anyway because it's an existing structure.
Yeah, that's just
So we're just bringing one pole across the street and that's it.
Okay, I apologize.
No,
I
I'm just making
apologize.
sure you don't have to.
Proper
almost
terminology.
you don't need.
Proper terminology for the viewing audience is always a positive.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve poll hearing 236-33393 from N-Grid as advertised in February 12th, 2018 Telegram and Gazette.
Second.
Hearing a motion and second. Any further comments? Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Thank you very much for the information and thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
See you soon. We'll be here again.
Perfect, that's what I like to hear.
Very nice guy.
Just,
All
if I
right.
may, just one note.
Sure.
I had a conversation with Kevin Shaughnessy, and he was saying that they pay these guys overtime to come to these meetings, and a lot of times it's not necessary. So Kevin's gonna put together in a memo form and address it to the board, and I'll discuss it at that point in time, but, this might have been one case where he really wasn't necessary, because we were expecting it, we were waiting for it, and the police and fire were out there, they identified the site, and so, just wanna let the board know preliminarily, but, Kevin Shaughnessy will write a memo to the board shortly.
Well, of course, to your point, we have the okay signed off on, fire, police, highway.
Right.
At least from my perspective, that's the biggest stamp that we need, so,
Okay,
thank you for that, Jim.
sure.
All right, next up, I just want to let the viewing audience know that we had scheduled an audit presentation, but unfortunately, the representative's unavailable tonight. So what we're going to do is we're going to postpone this to probably our next meeting
Yeah,
or the
what
one
is that,
thereafter.
March 6th? Yes, and the audit is done, everything is done, it's just, we need to schedule the time with Melanson Heath to come in.
Wonderful.
Sure.
All right, so moving right along to agenda item number 4, we have a budget presentation. But we're going to take a couple of minutes because we're going to have a visual presentation.
Is that lit up good? Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna get started. This is the preliminary budget presentation for fiscal year 19. It's typically done this time of year, first or second meeting in February. And it gives us a preliminary outlook at the budget. Obviously, there's still work to be done. The budget isn't balanced at this point. We still have to figure out how we're going to get to that end goal, which we will get to. But I just want to lay out what I'm thinking about right now and get some feedback from the board if there is any. This is my 11th budget presentation. The town budget is $32,355,309. An increase of $471,000 or 1.5% over FY18 final budget. Revenue is increasing $675,000, which is okay. However, expenses are increasing at a much faster rate than the revenues are, which is a problem. So we currently have a deficit of $187,000. That deficit is pretty new to the making. A week ago, Monday, we had a surplus of $12,000. Then I got word from Blackstone Valley Technical Vocational School that what I plugged in for 11 additional students attending was $150,000 as a placeholder. I was told by Dr. Fitzpatrick, expect $250,000 for those 11 additional students. That was a bit of a shock, and we'll get back to that at a later time. I also, on the following day, I got a note from the superintendent of schools saying there were 5 additional students that applied to Norfolk Agricultural School, Norfolk Aggie, as this board knows. And to attend Norfolk Agricultural School, that's at a $23,000 a year in tuition. So that's $100,000 in Blackstone Valley, $100,000 for Norfolk Aggie. That's the deficit. On top of the $12,000 we had, that's where it comes from. It's all education related between Blackstone and Norfolk Aggie. So we'll get back to that in a minute. The school department appropriation increased to by $377,000. They're doing okay, although special education costs continue to put a stress on their budget. We are dealing with issues, circuit breaker is one of the ways that we fund out-of-district placements, special education costs. We don't have enough circuit breaker to cover those costs. I think the governor, or the state government only funded like 68%, and we're asking for more than that. So to close out this year, it'll be a little bit of a challenge. He might have to use school choice monies, which there's a surplus of, to close the gap that he has in this fiscal year. And next year will be an additional challenge. We're, again, $2 million over net school spending required. A lot of that is the capital money we've given the school department. That goes towards net school spending. And then again, the two big unknowns that are now relatively known is 11 additional students is a $250,000 increase. Norfolk Aggie, 5 additional students applied, potentially a $100,000 increase. Now, those are just placeholders because Blackstone has yet to pass a budget. They pass that typically in March. I did contact Dr. Fitzpatrick today and ask for a preliminary copy of his budget so we can understand the numbers that go behind that. But it is an issue. I think we get hit harder than any other municipality within the 13-town district of Blackstone Valley because we are the wealthiest district in that group of 13. And Chapter 70 is a wealth-based formula, and we get hit harder because of that. And it's a fact of life, and we have to deal with it. So, unfortunately. Our healthcare costs, we preliminary put in a placeholder of 8%. That's approximately $225,000. I'm working with the IAC to adopt a high deductible HSA account with Fallon Direct and Select as a second alternative. I think the 8% is conservative. We've asked for a rate hold, which is a 0% increase. Considering that we're adopting the health savings account, high deductible, which should help us push more people to direct. And our experience over the last 3 or 4 months has been positive. Our experience is based on a 1 or under, the current healthcare rules, Obamacare specifically. The bogey, as I understand it, is 0.9. So it's not 1 now, it's 0.9. So any experience under 0.9 is positive, means that the insurance company's making money and the town deserves a break. Anything over 0.9 is the insurance company's losing money and the town gets hit harder. The last 3 months have been averaging about 0.82. So the trend is relatively positive on the health insurance. That health insurance experience is through November, and they've only been our insurer for 5 months up to that point. So it's really hard for them to predict what the next year is going to be like, looking only at 5 months worth of experience. But our current trend is positive, and I'm hoping that we can get a relatively low increase or even a rate hold, considering all we're putting forward to them. Construction of new police station obviously is underway. It was a lot of work getting it to this point. Obviously, the special town meeting a week or 2 ago to adopt the using the premium for the police station, which we put a change order in this week to deal with the maintenance bay. And work will begin shortly on the fiber and simulcast antennas, which was the $600,000 appropriation of free cash to public safety network. Dennis has applied for a community compact grant for $200,000 to bring fiber over to the Wilkes neighborhood, as well as extend the antenna from 75 feet to a 100-foot monopole at that location. So all of this is happening at the same time. A lot's going on regarding the police station. Other overview, we plan to ask town meeting for a general override to support the newly created roadway stabilization fund. We discussed that a couple of weeks ago. This override would have an impact on the average home about $74. This would allow us to do $2 million worth of work in year 1, and in year 3, an additional $1 million worth of work. And then, as I've stated in the past, at years 8, and then 11, and then 13, you know, it pretty much becomes a recurring $500,000 every other year that's available for road work, on top of the Chapter 90 money, which is $450,000. So almost getting $1 million worth of work farther out every other year. So it seems like a long-term solution to deal with a long-term issue, and I look forward to listening to the residents' feedback at town meeting. We also intend to present a home rule petition to request the legislature authorize the town of Sutton to abate residents' tax bill that is for an individual that is serving overseas. That's somebody in the armed forces that owns a home in town, and they are currently serving the country in overseas. Chairman Lemanic's been working with the assessors to draft this legislation. Nick Nunemacher and Joyce have been working with him. I think we've got a pretty good request. I'll present that to the board at the next Selectmen's meeting on March 6th. And again, we've applied for 2 community compacts grant. One is to supply ClearGov application, which is a transparent tool for residents to see how and where the money is spent, town money is spent. And the other application is for fiber, as I just mentioned. Dennis Toll's been the lead on that, and he's asking for $200,000 for that project. Departmental changes. 173,000. That's kind of misleading. I put approximately $145,000 in the personnel line item budget to deal with raises for unions. We have active union negotiations ongoing at this point in time, and that's a placeholder for me, just so I know I have the money to pay for changes in the contract and any potential raises, as well as all department heads and staff, et cetera. The employee benefits right now is going up $371,000. Keep in mind that $225,000 of that is healthcare. So, you know, if we're able to have a price hold with healthcare this year, then that number comes down significantly. Another increase under benefits is our pension costs. That number went up 10% or $100,000. And I'd expect that $100,000 every year for the next 15 years. If not, it'll be higher than that, because right now, Worcester Regional pension system is only 42% funded. And their goal is to pay it off in 2035, a goal that I think is unreachable at this point with this funding structure, as well as the funding formula. They're anticipating a return of almost 8%, 7.75. It just seems very unrealistic expectations, but that's just my perspective. I'm sure there's different perspectives out there. And then education, $727,000. Our revenue is only going up $675,000. So we don't even have enough money to cover the education costs this year. So you can see how 1 year of unknown, for the vocational school and Norfolk Aggie School, both town of Sutton schools, that's an additional, $300,000, $350,000 potentially. It's a major hit to everything, and unfortunately the budget is so tight that when you have a big hit from a one-time hit like Blackstone Valley or Norfolk Aggie, it blows the budget out of whack, but we'll be able to handle it. So this is just details on everything. State aid went up roughly. Those are gross numbers. The Chapter 70 is $27,660. The UGA money, unrestricted general government revenue, which is formerly lottery, I don't know why they haven't changed that, but that's okay, is $27,294. And then obviously we'll have to net out the charges to get the true state aid numbers. Local receipts are going up $50,000. again, there's no one-time money in this budget, so ultimately, that's the picture. The budget's going up 1.48%. I don't need to spend much time on this. I just do this for my own pleasure. The next chart actually says a lot more, and it's a simple chart, but you can see that state aid took a major dive in 2009 and 10, and then started rebuilding in 2012, I think, and then we're up probably $400,000, but we're still below the peak in 2009, which was 6.4, and now we're at 6.2. So that's
6.2 or 4 point?
6.2.
Now, we're at 6.2?
6.4 was 2009.
Okay,
Now we're at 6.2. Rough numbers.
okay, thanks.
And you can see, if you look at that, it went down a little bit. And that, I can't draw a straight line with this. Sorry, you get the idea.
Yeah.
But again, that's 9, 10 fiscal years later, and we're still not at the level we were in 2009. So it's nice that it goes up $27,000 a year in Chapter 70 and $20,000 a year in UGA funds, but we're not at the point we are should be at, and ultimately, the property tax continues to grow as a greater reliance of revenues for the town of Sutton, and virtually any other municipality, to my understanding. I haven't done the historical analysis of this, but I know that last year the number was the tax revenue made up 71% of the budget. This year it makes up 72% of the budget. I think if we look back a number of years, we'll figure out it started at probably 66%, and then it just has grown. Every year it gets a little bit more property tax versus state aid, because we're raising, almost $500,000 or $600,000, between $500,000 and $600,000 in property taxes. In state aid, we're getting $40,000 to $50,000. So that trend will continue, and eventually we will be obviously paying more property taxes than we will be getting state aid. New growth, it's pretty much in the $200,000 area over the last 10 years. We had a peak back in 2016-17, which was the Galaxy development and all the power that was associated with that, transformers, et cetera. Last year it came down to $440,000, give or take, and this year we budgeted $150,000. That's an area we're looking at is potentially an area that we can bump that up a little bit to help solve the deficit right now. Along with healthcare and a number of other solutions that we have going through our heads. So, local receipts, pretty positive trend. You can see the peak back in 2009. That was the big year, but we are up from that peak versus state aid, which is down from that peak. But we've consistently raised local receipts. This year we funded an additional $50,000 in local receipts to help fund the budget. So right now we typically receive $650,000. This is the slide I presented last year. We were at $675,000 this year. Our typical expenses are healthcare, $200,000 plus. We've got $225,000. School department, $350,000. That's exactly the number we gave them, plus Chapter 78 on top of that, that $27,000. So their appropriation is $377,000. Town department increases roughly $100,000. I think we're relatively close to that. Pension increases went up $100,000 this year. It was dead on. The unknowns killed us. Blackstone Valley Vocational. I question mark because sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. Well, this year we got killed. It's going up over $200,000. And Norfolk Aggie is another, consistently 2 or 3 students attending. This year we have 5 additional students applying. So I don't know what that number will be in the end, But we've got to put the money aside to fund it, just in case they choose to go. It's an old slide, but I just, we are working to bring in an additional revenue to the town beyond the typical motor vehicle excise taxes and departmental receipts. Again, general government, a lot of that is the money I put in personnel for raises. Education, you can see going up $730,000, a 4.5% increase. Again, a couple of those are placeholders. The Sutton Schools is not a placeholder, that's an actual number. Again, public safety, the rest of these numbers are kind of misleading. What it doesn't have in these numbers are cost of living adjustments. So all of those will be increases. I just don't know how much of an increase. Depends upon the raises that are given out. So the 100+ thousand that I have in personnel will be distributed to public safety, public works, and these various departments. So that 173,000, the majority of that will be redistributed through these other departments, and you'll see increases in them. Nominal, but there will be increases. I have increased snow and ice under public works by $25,000 to $200,000. That's the big hit there. That's why that number's up so significantly. And then the benefits, pension and healthcare are the two biggest benefits. Between the two of them, it went up $325,000 out of $371. Those are the big numbers. Property casualty is another benefit that is going up. I don't know by how much. I met with Dave Labonte from Cabot Risk once. He's yet to provide me with the final number. I think part of the increase in that is we are insuring the new police station for the first time, starting in January next year. So that's a little bit behind that. I've already talked about all this. So you see the 10% on the pension costs, property casualty, new police station, healthcare is an estimate, but we are looking into the high deductible HSA account with a deductible of $1,500 for an individual, $3,000 for a family. We are looking into a way that we can match that. So for an individual, we would contribute $750. For a family, we contribute $1,500. And the individual would be responsible for coming up for the other $1,500. It's a challenge, but I think we're at the point where we've got to think in a different way with these significant increases in healthcare. And last year we had 4 individuals opt out of our health plan. We changed over to Fallon from Maya. We've increased that number to 19. So there's a benefit to opting out. I think it's, $2,000 for an individual, $3,000? $1,500 and $3,000. Okay, same. So $1,500 for an individual, $3,000 for a family plan. The town saves a significant amount of money if a family plan does not participate, roughly $10,000, $11,000. So it's relatively makes sense to give the employee $3,000 for them choosing not to participate in our health plan. And that's a significant amount of savings we've realized in this fiscal year's budget that we will discuss at the end of the year at closeout. The school department's doing okay this year. Our Green Community Grant application, we're focusing primarily on the school department. We're looking to replace a boiler in the elementary school. We placed a boiler in the Early Learning Center last year for $130,000. We've part of that Green Communities Grant application due in March that Doreen DeFazio is working on is a boiler in the elementary school, and we're budgeting roughly $150,000 for that, which is beautiful because these boilers are near the end of life. They've been in place for 19 years. Arguably, the town would have to replace them anyways. We have the benefit of this Green Community Program where we get this grant and do all of it for us continuing to participate in the Green Communities Program. So it's a huge win-win. And additionally, we're looking at LED lighting in the middle school and high school gymnasium. That's an additional $100,000 that we're looking at that's not part of this. So significant investment in the school department. They have issues as well dealing with the costs and of all the departments. But if we can deal with the electricity and energy cost and bring that cost down, then it'll help the school department in other ways. So I think that's a positive. Enterprise funds, same as last year. And the capital plan, we're funding it through two revenue sources. One is free cash and the other one is new growth. You can see that's roughly the breakdown of the capital plan. You know, we use the new growth for one-time purposes because that'll make that revenue available in the following fiscal year. If you use it for recurring costs, then you're going to lose the new growth. It's going to disappear because it's going to be eaten up by, you know, salaries or whatever the recurring cost is. If you use it for one-time purposes, it's there available for appropriation in the following fiscal year. So we're really trying to work with new growth and strategically utilize that on one-time expenses so that we have it the following fiscal year if we need to. So again, the stabilization fund is very solid. Post-employment benefits are over $1 million right now, $1,024,000. The school department has a solid budget, good class sizes, but they are challenged with special education costs and with a lack of circuit breaker revenue, et cetera. It's a real challenge. And we got hit with large increases from Blackstone and Norfolk Aggie, which threw our budget out of balance. So we need to make sure that expenses do not exceed our revenues. I feel comfortable we'll get through this budget and probably through 2020 as well. But we're looking a couple years ahead now in FY21 and beyond. So we just need to get through this hump. But it is a challenge right now dealing with these one-time costs. Hopefully one-time costs. If they're recurring costs, if we get an annual increase of $200,000 from Blackstone, then we can pretty much forget about it because we're in trouble. Healthcare. Hopefully the HSA brings the cost down, and we'll look to make that a permanent structure as part of the town and our healthcare provision. That's essentially it. Thank you for your attention.
Well, Jim, if I may so, in advance as we're all repositioning ourselves, very informative, very helpful. Well done. All right, we all ready? All right, so why don't we open up to comments and questions? John?
I would like to say that I know how hard Jim and the financial team works to put all the information together and to have a balanced budget. There's a lot of pride in that process, and we get a lot of that feedback. And it's nice for us as selectmen to tell the citizens we have a balanced budget because of this and this and this. So I just want to stress, Jim did, and I think every one of my colleagues will follow, that because our budget is out of whack, $187,000 this year, it's because of the increases in education. It's pretty much beyond our control.
Yeah.
So, Jim, just keep doing the job you've been doing, and I think everything will come out okay.
Thank you.
The other thing I would like to mention is last week we had an armed robbery in Sutton at Starbucks. And this last couple of weeks when we had the town meeting, putting in a brand new maintenance bay and a new police station, everything, it was in there once and then it was taken out, but now it's back in. I'm for one, because I remember the old police station and everything. Just this last week, they had a car in our police station here, and it was processed, and with everything, fingerprints and photos and everything else to tie up this case of what they had. And the police from Northridge and Sutton did a hell of a job and doing all that. So here's one more aspect of why we have this extra bay. Yes, it is a lot of money, but you really need these pieces of the puzzle, because I remember when I didn't have it. And so please, everything will work out, and it's a plus for this town to have that extra. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim and Tim, I dare say, I appreciate, that was an excellent presentation. That was really good. There's a ton of information in there. And more things to comment on than I think I have time to comment on. So just a quick question. Your first slide said that the revenues are up by $675,000, the budget is up by $471,000, and yet we have a deficit. So I assume that's debt service? Is the difference
Yes.
between those things?
It is, yeah. The Capital Stabilization Fund had, we paid off all our debt exclusion debt. Last year, we budgeted $150,000. This year, we didn't budget anything for debt within the general fund, Capital Stabilization Fund. So that was minus $150,000 in revenue,
Yep.
essentially. So that sort of shows the delta.
Debt exclusion debt
Yes.
basically is rolling off the books.
Yes, exactly. It's not debt exclusion debt, it's Capital Stabilization Fund, so it's an old capital plan and other debt exclusion, not debt exclusion, non-debt exclusion debt rolling off. That was the
That you had a budget for.
$150,000.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. These are just general comments, listening to the kinds of things that you mentioned is, to me, it's sort of a sad commentary that we had 19 people opt out of our health insurance, and we have to celebrate that as a good thing. It's good for our budget, but, it's clearly, what's good for the budget isn't always good for the people, but that's the world of health insurance that we're in, and it's just too bad, I guess, is what I'm saying. Just again, an observational comment. We have a lot of students that are transferring out to other schools. Those are specialty schools that they're transferring to, and there may be little we can do about that because people are going presumably for some kind of specialty that we don't offer here. But the comment that I have is that if, as a town, if we could look at the services we're providing within our own school, the local school district, and find a way to keep students here, we can educate those students here for a lot less money than we can if we have to send them off-site. Again,
Half the cost.
And there's not always a way to do that. There are certainly programs that will never be able to duplicate there, that they have there that we don't have here, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
And, I just say the last comment that I want to make is just a reminder to everybody. I think this presentation for me was really a great demonstration of the structural deficit that we have, and that, we're in a good fiscal position. We talk about that a lot. But nonetheless, we're living in a structural deficit, and those things catch up to you after time. And so, continuing to keep our eye on solid budgeting principles, but also, every opportunity we have for new revenue is good opportunity. We shouldn't pass it up when we can. And, just be mindful of that, I'm saying to the town, that we do have a structural deficit. You said we'll be able to handle it, and we will be able to handle it this year because we're
next
in a
couple
pretty
years.
good place
Yeah.
at the moment. But that doesn't last forever. The good
No.
times don't last forever, and sort of hidden within all of these numbers is this sort of, I hesitate to use the term ticking time bomb, but it will catch up to you after time, and we need to be aware of that.
I mentioned the new growth and how we're, strategically utilizing that money for one-time purposes. A little bit of that new growth does go to recurring cost every additional year
Yep.
that we have. And more is gonna go to your recurring cost, the less revenue we're bringing in. And you're right, eventually that gap's gonna close.
Right.
And we're gonna be having to look at different options.
That's what I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for the presentation.
Mike?
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. Couple questions. It seems like, you had the puzzle built, Tim, the financial team, yourself, and then you found a few new pieces. And it's like, you're always gonna. And,
Last week wasn't a good week.
Yeah, and it's like, where do these pieces go? What do we do with these pieces? They're there. We need them. But that brings me towards to kind of go towards the back of the presentation, where I wrote down new growth 425 previous year and 150 this year, and you'd mentioned that there may be some tweaking in that. But would we really want to do that? Would you really want to do that? Because we just talked about the new, not only one time for new growth, not tying it into an annual reliability on it.
You sort of understand the predicament.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we're at. I mean, if I increase the new growth as a revenue source, it's counting on recurring revenue coming in. If I get certified new growth, I budget 150,000 in new growth, and we are able to balance the budget. Then when new growth is certified in the fall, and the number's more like 300,000, then I have an additional $150,000 in new growth. Or if I budget it because I need it for a recurring cost, then I lose that money into the budget.
Right.
So that is a predicament that goes back and forth.
And then you're continuously counting on that new growth every year to maintain without any increase.
Well, every year we generally fund 2.5% plus new growth, and that plus new growth is, we like to start at $150,000. We've pushed it up to $200,000 past couple of years. It's very, you got to be careful on how you deal with new growth. If you over anticipate it, and then you get less than you've budgeted, then you create a deficit, a true deficit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the other one was the entire Chapter 70, us with BVT in Norfolk, and the fact that what Selectman Hall had mentioned. Is it that we put a place marker, or the financial team put a place marker in for 11 students, and then Blackstone Valley said that, well, wait a minute, the cost per student is going to be more, or wait a minute, we have more students than you expected going there?
No, we knew it was 11 students,
Yeah.
because that's as of October 1st pupil count. So we knew that number months ago.
Right.
So I plugged in $150,000. Now, Dr. Fitzpatrick communicated with me that's not nearly enough because the Chapter 70 formula, you're the wealthiest community in 13-town district. You get hit with a higher charge than other communities. Northbridge has, 40 to 50 additional students going to Norfolk for Blackstone Valley, but our charge is just as much as
With 11.
Northbridge. Well, total. We have roughly 101,
Okay.
and Northbridge has 150, but our charge is essentially the same. But Northbridge is a less wealthy district, Sutton is a more wealthy district. And that's how the Chapter 70 formula calculates, and it penalizes wealthy districts and expects wealthy districts to contribute more, but there is not more. The only way to get more is to do an override, which you can get more, but then you've got to ask the public to raise their taxes more.
Okay. So it's almost like saying what happened was for $13,000 a student, roughly, it's almost $24,000 a student.
Yeah, and we Tim and I look at the past performance for future,
Yeah.
Sort of like a mutual fund. But, last year we had a reduction in 5 students. We budgeted, just for rough numbers, $50,000 in addition. I don't know how to say this. Essentially, the 5 fewer students was $50,000 cost savings in our budget. So we figure 5 additional students equals $50,000. So it's kind of a rudimentary cost savings. You figure 5 additional students, we save 50. So I got 11 additional students, I'm going to budget $150,000. I was unaware of how the Chapter 70 formula affects that kind of increase. Now, I'll have to see the actual numbers from the preliminary budget that I've requested from Dr. Fitzpatrick. It's late in the budgeting year to not have a draft budget. He typically doesn't send a draft budget over. So I'm requesting that we see it as soon as possible, so we can kind of figure out where we're at.
Is this pretty much what it's gonna be going forward, or will it depend on year to year? Will the average per
It
student?
depends every year. Now, I guess one perspective is we now have 11 additional students for the next 4 years in their system. Now we have to look at how many graduating seniors we have, how many incoming freshmen we're gonna have next year. So we'll know that as of October 1 next year. Well, or this fall, we'll know that number.
Yeah, it seems like that they're alone, like you said last week. I mean, the budget, equals out, and then you get a 200,000+ between the two schools increase.
Very frustrating.
Throws everything right off.
Yeah.
And it's no control of the financial team.
Yeah.
Or, it doesn't show all the hard work you guys have put in over the course of the year on balancing it.
Yeah.
When something like this, completely out of our control, your control, and the financial team's control, comes up, there's nothing that you can be done except to obviously work harder or figure out a way to.
Yeah, and we probably need to work on our communication with Blackstone Valley and Norfolk Aggie. I don't know how we know that. I just got a phone call last week from Superintendent Friend saying we got 5 additional students applying. So that's the first he knew about it, and he shared that with me. Unfortunately, Blackstone knows the number a lot earlier than I do, and I think I just need to do a better job at reaching out to Dr. Fitzpatrick and our representative, Julie Mitchell, who is a member of that board and representative for the town.
I mean, it doesn't seem like it would change the overall outcome, what it would be. I mean, if we knew this, if you knew it 2 months earlier, then it would have been
Right.
187,000 2 months ago. So it's still something that's
Right.
completely out of our control
Very true.
on what the state's going to do, and we're tied to what they look at it because we're a wealthier town.
Yeah.
Which kind of it kicks us at the end, but there's nothing we can do or the financial team can do to prepare what the state's going to do.
Right.
So I again say great job on the budget.
Thank you.
And it must have been a headache.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks, Tim.
All right, thanks,
Mr.
Mike.
Chairman.
I'd like to echo, of course, the sentiment. I definitely appreciate the hard work that both you guys and the entire financial team put into the budget every single year. And it has a tremendous amount of moving pictures, and if anyone can see on TV, it's the bottom budget. So, these gentlemen put a lot of time into it and a lot of thought and planning. I have one minor question, and it's for my own sake, and then, of course, I have some comments. I might as well do the question first because it's easy. Could you explain to me what a health savings account is?
An HSA, or Health Savings Account, the abbreviation is HSA. It's a high deductible plan. So let's just take a family, for instance. The deductible would be $3,000. So for any health procedure, whether it be medication, an MRI, anything not preventative, if you go to a doctor for a physical, there's no hit on the deductible, no charge whatsoever. So if all your interaction with doctors are preventative, a mammogram or a physical or a colonoscopy, all of that is preventative, and that doesn't hit your deductible. What does hit the deductible are specialist physicians, doctors' visits, medication, if you're on different types of medications, MRIs, obviously a hospital visit or outpatient surgery, that's a significant hit on it. That'll probably blow out the deductible of the $3,000. After you hit the $3,000, then you will have some minor copays. So, doctor's visits, $25. Inpatient surgery, maybe $100. So minor copays. But it's still a potential for it to increase your cost of medical care that year. And we do have caps of anything after that cap is free medical, whether it's specialists or prescription drugs. We're looking at adjusting that cap. So the cap right now is high. So one of the benefits of the HSA is that if you don't use all your money, then you can keep it in that fund and allow for it to grow pre-tax. And at 65, when you become Medicare eligible, then you can use that, whatever's in that HSA you can leave it in there. You can use it for your Part B premiums, to help pay for your health insurance as a retiree. So for a municipal employee, that means your pension is pretty much left alone because you're not using it to fund healthcare. You've got your HSA to fund your healthcare. You can also contribute more than $3,000 in the family plan. You can contribute up to $6,900 under the HSA. That allows people to invest more in the HSA as another kind of pre-tax savings account, a traditional IRA type account that is there when you retire and you have this additional money to help you survive in retirement. Probably to pay your Medicare wraparound program, Part B premium, and that type of stuff. And once you get beyond the $3,000 and you're investing more like $5,000, $6,000, then you can use those monies to invest in mutual funds. So you can deal with the long-term growth in that account and let that money accrue over time. And then you're only on the hook for $3,000 a year primarily, other than some of the co-pays. And if the town is able to match that $1,500, if you're healthy and you don't need to go to the doctor and you just have preventative, then that's really a $1,500 raise to all employees. Somebody like me that, utilizes the medical system from a preventative way, but, I have to go to these appointments. My premium I'll probably hit the $3,000, but, it's still a wise investment for me because I have money taken out in my flexible spending account of $2,000 to fund with medical, dental visits, crowns and caps and things like that, eyeglasses, all different sorts of expenses for medical.
Pre-tax.
Pre-tax. The money goes in pre-tax, it's taken out for medical costs, pre-tax.
Interesting. Thank you. Every now and then you hear them mentioning on, the news networks, politician advocating for such a move, and I had never heard in terms of the details, so very enlightening. Thank you very much. It sounds like an interesting option. All right, so I do have some comments, and I'll get through them relatively quick. First off, on top of the hard work that the financial team put into this budget, I would like to again thank the entire team for developing the road plan. I mean, we had the presentation with that last week, and when I brought that up at our goals meeting over the summertime, I didn't think it would come to fruition, but I am very hopeful that the residents take a time to read the news story that was published in the Chronicle, detailing how it's going to operate, and hopefully support this at town meeting, because as Matt Stencil mentioned to us at our last meeting, it's not the saving grace, but it may push the needle forward, which is something that we need. I'd also like to thank Nick and Joyce for working on one of my other goals, the home rule petition. They put a lot of work in, and they definitely deserve all types of credit for putting that together. And again, hopefully, town meeting supports that. Fingers crossed, of course, for the grant sought by the chief to offset the fiber costs. I know that this is just another example of the work that all the departments put in over and over again, looking for creative ways to help supplement services as well as offset the costs. So hopefully this happens, and again, that extra $200,000 to extend the fiber network, that would be huge.
Yeah, if you look at that, that's a good point. I mean, we're looking at $200,000 through the community compact grant. We've received $5,000 for the ClearGov application. We're applying for $250,000 from Green Communities Grant.
Right.
That if we're successful in all of that, that's almost $500,000 we're bringing into the town, and for important services that ultimately, if it wasn't funded through grants, that we would have to pay for it out of our budget.
Which I'm assuming the majority of municipalities ended up doing.
Right.
So yeah, excellent work for that. The most challenging thing for me is hearing the schools, the impact on the budget, because personally I'm an educator and I'm also a parent, and I definitely value and appreciate education, but, the continuing escalating costs above and beyond that Prop 2.5 limit, to me, it's just it's gonna create an untenable, unsustainable situation, both short-term, in terms of operation budget, and also planning in the long term. So I'm really hoping that this is a temporary spike, and we'll see a little relief in terms of the numbers next year. Because I spent some time a few years back trying to figure out how Chapter 70 works, you know, how a community like Sutton is adjudged to be wealthy, and it's really convoluted. And I'm not even gonna, you know, waste the listeners' time trying to explain it, because I don't really understand it myself. But at the end of the day, our town is one of the towns that loses. So it's really unfortunate. Although, on a side note, and I'm assuming you've heard of it, and maybe other people in the community have heard about it, I've heard that there are some school committees in the Commonwealth that are contemplating seeking a redress with the Chapter 70 formula. So I don't know if it's in the preliminary stage, I don't know if it's gonna be litigation, I don't know where it's gonna go, but hoping that, you know, the school committees get together and, you know, kind of stand up for the municipalities across the Commonwealth.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, ultimately, there's one pie, and it's how you separate that pie. And there are, you know, fixed costs at the state, just as there are fixed costs with the municipality. You know, they've got OPEB, they've got all these other costs. And, you know, I hate to say this, I understand what they're going through. It doesn't mean I can't blame them for some stuff and say that we need more, but you know, if you increase the Chapter 70 numbers to $100 per student versus $20 per student, that'll help us out. But where's that money coming from?
Right.
It's not coming from taxes, because God knows we can't raise taxes in the state of Massachusetts. But it'll come from somewhere,
Right.
and you know, somebody will sacrifice funding for municipalities, Chapter 70. So.
The other thing that I like seeing, and it's always a good thing, is that your desire to avoid using one-time monies. You know, avoiding such reliance, you know, helps us avoid funding cliffs, which, you know, at least from my experience, I know the school department had to deal with that, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. They budgeted in one-time monies, they added that into the operational budget, and when those funds cease to exist, there's your cliff. And the cost was bodies with layoffs.
You know, in all fairness, I think that to some extent we're using new growth similar as the way they use school choice revenues. You know, they peaked out at $1.5 million in school choice, and then they added it to their operational budget, as
Right.
you know all too well. I think that's what we're doing with new growth, trying to get over the peak of the funding issue and try to deal with the ongoing costs that we have, trying to lower healthcare costs, trying to lower all these other costs while dealing with the peak, and we're using new growth to get us over that peak. So hopefully it works.
Again, again, hopefully it's just a temporary rise, and hopefully the decline will be easy, because those strains will cease to exist.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you know, self-reliance is a good thing to a degree, but as you mentioned, we're relying more and more upon property taxes in particular as the largest component of our budget. And again, we have a greater say in where the money goes. We don't have those strings attached with mandates that come from the states. But what's gonna happen when the state comes through and reassesses property values in 2020? You know, are we gonna really get a wake up, a shock? Are the residents just gonna be enraged? So again, I appreciate all the work that the financial team does finding creating ways to, again, try to avoid some of the gaps, smooth things out, and, you know, hopefully see us to better times down the road. And lastly, green communities, again, as was mentioned with the grants, huge. Good work, Doreen, on that one. All right. Next up on the agenda, we have a town charter revision request. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The charter has been up at the State House for 4 years now. You know, it's tried to make its way through, but it's hit bumps along the way. And the latest bump has been Ryan Fatman's trying to push this through the Senate, and Senate Council has contacted us through Ryan and suggesting these additional amendments to the charter occur. None of which require town meeting approval. The Board of Selectmen can make these decisions, and then we'll forward it up to the Senate, the State Senate. Amendment number 1 is offices to be filled. This is for the housing Authority, that 3 members can be filled by the Board of Selectmen. The 4th member needs to be a resident of the Housing Authority, and the 5th member comes from the state. So right now, we've got the board appointing 4, one of which is currently a resident. And we always try to have a resident on this board. So it's kind of, anyway, the Senate Council prefers that we make it formal in our charter, and that's one request for an amendment. The second one is recall petitions. The current provision says that 50% of the total number of persons who voted in the most recent annual town election versus what they would like, 20% of all qualified voters of the town as the date of the affidavit was filed by the town to the town clerk. The big difference is 50% of the total voters. You know, if you have a small Maytown election and you don't have a contested Board of Selectmen race or any other sort of overrides, or then let's say 50 people or 150 people show up to vote.
We've seen that.
Then you get 50% of that, 75 people, and you can have an override. You can have a recall petition. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. You're not getting a lot of the public involved with this recall petition, assuming you want to recall a member of the Board of Selectmen. You know, I support this. I think a much higher threshold should be in place, and I think 20% of the all qualified voters, registered voters, that would be more in the thousands versus the hundreds. And I think that's a much higher threshold, and then you're forced, as supporting this recall petition, to go out and get additional support. And if that support's not there, then the recall petition doesn't happen. Then the third one is, again, clarification on amendment number 1. 1 member shall be a member, a tenant of the Housing Authority appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So again, it just clarifies. Do you agree with that? Yeah, but this one says 3 members.
yeah.
That's the change.
Okay.
Amendment number 3 is 3 members shall be elected by the voters. 1 shall be a tenant of the Housing Authority appointed by the Board of Selectmen. So, the third one, again, just kind of memorializes that 1 member of the Housing Authority is actually tenant of the Housing Authority itself. So the Housing Authority was a big issue with the Senate. These laws weren't in place when the bylaw passed, or the charter passed town meeting in 2014, just as a side note. But they've come into place since then, and we obviously have to adopt them according to Senate Council.
All right, thank you. John?
I'm all set, nothing.
Same here.
Mike?
I just have one quick, or hopefully quick. If it isn't, then they'll strike it. But so 3 members are elected by the voters for the Housing Authority. If one of those 3 elected, so that the voters elect 3 people, if one of those is a member, a tenant of the Housing Authority, would we have the will to nominate someone that's outside a tenant of the Housing Authority? Does that make sense? So 3 of them go in to be elected, and they're on the ballot. And one of them lives there.
That's not the way Amendment 3 reads.
Okay.
It says 1 member shall be a tenant of the Housing Authority and be appointed by the Board of
So
Selectmen.
we would still have to appoint someone, so that technically there'd be 2 members that live there on that
Yes.
board. Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding, because I don't fully understand
That's
this.
what I kind of thought, but I wasn't positive. So we now understand. Thank you. That's all. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that to me seems pretty straightforward, I guess. And yeah, it
I
is
mean,
what it
really,
is.
the only positive is that we did have another provision in the charter that we sent up to the State House, is that, you know, the charter would be reviewed every 5 years, so this pushes it out another 4 years. So
All right, well, yeah.
we won't have to
So-
review it for another 5 years whenever it gets approved. So.
There's a positive there.
Dave's super unhappy.
Well,
Guided by that.
you know, in terms of the First and the Third Amendments, I don't really have anything to say. Just one comment on the Second Amendment. you know, I agree with you, Jim, on that. If recall is warranted, the illegal or unethical behavior by an elected official will either be known by the community or will be quickly informed. So I think garnishing 20% of the qualified voters will happen like that.
Yeah.
So, and it avoids silly things.
Yes.
I don't like the person or whatever. So,
Trivial stuff, yeah.
yeah, it raises the threshold, makes it more significant and more concrete, at least in my opinion.
Right, I agree.
All right, so I would entertain a motion regarding the 3 charter revisions.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the 3 town charter revisions as follows. To amend the bill by striking out in line 162 the figure 4 and inserting in place thereof the following figure 3. And by striking out in lines 211 and 212 the words 50% of the total number of persons who voted at the most recent annual town election, and inserting in place thereof the following words, 20% of the qualified voters of the town as of the date that the affidavit was filed with the town clerk. And in proposed subsection A of section 3-7, by striking out the last sentence and inserting in place thereof the following sentence. 3 members shall be elected by the voters. 1 member shall be a tenant of the housing authority appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and 1 member shall be appointed by the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. All right, next up, Town Administrator's Update. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FY19 budget, finance, and warrant public hearings will be held in March, Thursday, March 22nd, Tuesday, March 27th, and Wednesday, March 28th. I've attached a copy of the hearing schedule for the board's consideration. The state capital bond repair bill, Senator Ryan Fatman was able to set aside $3 million for water and sewer projects within the capital bond bill. The $3 million would go towards bringing water and sewer from the village to the center of town and down to the school department. So, since this is a bond bill, the governor still needs to borrow these funds to make it available. We had, Senator Dick Moore some years ago get some money in the
Sidewalk.
right, the sidewalk from the schools down to the to Shaw property in the. It was another bond bill, and that was never borrowed by the governor. So, I mentioned that, and hopefully this one is successful. Goddard Lodge, we're going out to bid for Goddard Lodge, hopefully for the last time, on February 28th. The filed subbids are due April 5th, and the general contractor is due April 12th. At that point, we'll identify the funding gap for Maytown meeting. We have $75,000 set aside for Maytown meeting. The awarding the notice to proceed will be contingent upon Maytown meeting funding if there is a gap. In home rule petition, at the meeting on March 6th, we'll be presenting the home rule petition so that members of the military who are homeowners that's serving overseas receive a tax abatement for their property taxes for a period of time they are out of the country. This issue was brought up at the over the summer goals meeting. That's all I have for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. John, any comments for Jim?
No, thank you. Good job, Jim.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. Kudos to Ryan for doing what he can do, and let's hope it's successful. We'll see, but if you don't ask, you don't get anything, so
Right.
you gotta go out and try. I just want to follow up on the Goddard Lodge thing. We've gone out a couple of times. Is the plan, so one thing I would say is we have significantly reviewed the original proposal that was there, and I think we've come back with something that's more realistic and I think much better prepared than what was kind of done outside.
Yeah, it needed some serious value engineering, if you will.
Good term.
To really cut back on some of the extravagance that was originally designed for. Obviously, there's a little bit of history. We terminated the contract with the original designer, hired a new designer that was able to work with us and have a much more moderate design. We've eliminated quite a bit of it. I think we've eliminated the painting filed sub-bid. The only filed sub-bid is electrical at this point. The masonry and painting are eliminated from that. The key is to just get this work done, to get it done where we have a porch on the outside, which is part of the grant. We're required to have that. But everything else was really simple. We couldn't have an elaborate design. We can't have wall sconces on the inside or anything else. We just need a simple design that's utilitarian, that the residents or the clubs and organizations can utilize, and that we can afford.
So I guess my specific question is, I think I'd like to say to the town that we've really made a significant effort to pare back some extravagances, as I think you were calling them. And, you know, we went out to bid with this. It still came in a little bit higher than we had hoped. We obviously hope that when we go out to bid this time, that isn't an issue and everything's within budget. But if it's not within scope, is the plan to go back to the town and ask for a little bit of money to help, or?
You know, at that point, I think we all just need to take a step back and talk about it. You know, I don't have a plan
Specific
F.
plan in place. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone out to bid, what's this, the third or fourth time? Cutting it back, scaling it back, eliminating stuff. At some point, the cost is the cost. And we've got to make a decision as a town whether this is something that we really value. Keep in mind that we do have $150,000 in donations. We've got a $150,000 federal state grant. So we've got a lot of outside money in this project, and we're asking the town to contribute, $75,000. So we're essentially matching all this outside monies. So it's not a huge contribution considering all the outside monies coming in.
Yeah, I guess that was my point, is this is a really nice project that really could be a centerpiece for the town, but we'll talk about that at a later time, so, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Mike?
I don't have any, the only thing I was going to touch a little bit on the Goddard Lodge also is the fact that, you know, for the amount of money that is asking, or has been asked from the town, and what, because we have the opportunity from the outside grant and the donors, that it is a little amount compared to the work that we can have done.
Yeah.
To make it without having to make it over the top.
Yeah.
But just, you know, a functionable facility, so, for the townspeople and the clubs.
Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Dave, you had one more point?
Yeah, thank you for that. I had meant to talk about the home rule petition. So I want to say, you know, you've talked about the help that you got downstairs for the work that was done, but I appreciate all the work that you did on this. And I would just like to say to the town that, you know, this seems like a nice thing to do for people that are serving the town overseas, and honestly, it's just not going to be a big cost. And so for such a small dollar amount, this seems like a good step. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And Jim, thank you for a wonderful update. I think my colleagues covered it all. So that being said, why don't we have announcements, roundtable, and correspondence? John?
Yeah, I was not here our last meeting, and I gotta say that this Selectmen's table and everything is really, really nice. And which is nice, it come from Sutton, Fairview, Millwork, where they do windows, and they've been a business there, paying their monies to the town of Sutton for all this time, and to go out to them, I think what is here is exceptional, and kudos to them, and I think it's a really nice design. So, that's it. I want someone to correct me and to chime in if they can. I've heard from some of the residents that, gee, John, why has our tax rate gone up? And I said, oh, I'm confused. I don't know if our tax rate went up. I thought our last tax rate prior was $16.88. This year it's $1,650. But when you get your tax bill, there's an increase in the tax bill. It's because your property values have gone up a little bit. And it's only gonna help everyone in the long run. So that's what I've been trying to explain to people. And, am I on the right message there, or?
Yeah, that's essentially it.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, the value of their property is worth more.
And that's a benefit.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you nailed it.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to revisit one topic, I think, from the budget presentation. You know, you, Jim, said you liked this particular slide just for yourself, but I think that revenue trend slide speaks volumes about where we are in Sutton, probably where we are across the entire Commonwealth at this point. But, you know, to remind the viewers, what Jim pointed out is that it's taken us 10 revenue cycles since the state began cutting contributions to Sutton and to most other municipalities, and we're still not back to where we were, and that's regardless of interest costs or inflation that has come about in the interim. And so it reinforces some other discussions that we've been having lately, which is that, you know, as a town like Sutton, we need to recognize, I need to recognize that, you know, we're sort of in it alone, that we continually need to be more and more self-reliant, that, you know, we're not going to get help from the outside world. We have to do things that need to get done ourselves. You know, so particularly I was mindful of the road repair article that's coming up, and I think that's a great example of that, where, you know, you all heard from me that I was sort of worried at the beginning that typically the funding comes from other sources, and, you know, maybe that's what we should, you know, we should think about. It should come from those sources. But I think that this is a reminder that that's, you know, that's kind of wasted thinking, that the money's not coming from there. So if we need to get the roads fixed, we're going to have to be looking internally for a way to do that. And, you know, I just think there are so many things that, so many areas where that's just the reality of the world that we're in. And so we just need to remember that. Jesse, you mentioned the possibility of a Chapter 90 kind of rework. And maybe in the same vein, what I'm worried about, that's been talked about for a number of years now. And I just worry that if they do that, we'll actually be worse than we are, you know? As Jim said, there's only one pie. So how they slice it up is really the magic in the formula. And if they, you know, if they consider Sutton to be a wealthy community today, there's nothing to say that they won't, you know, they won't amplify that effect in any new formula that's out there. So,
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that the majority of the municipalities that I heard that were looking at that were urban municipalities.
Yeah.
So yeah, a small town like Sutton will lose even more.
Yeah.
so that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike?
It's a great point there, Selectman Hall. You know, the fact that, you know, if they are going to take money and they are going to get it from somewhere, watch out, because it could come from so-called wealthy communities like ours,
Yeah.
that they consider us one. No, it seems like everything was covered. I did have one shout out for the Sutton Ute Co-op hockey team that has made the playoffs. They're back in the playoffs for the first time in several years. And, you know, congratulations to the whole team, but, you know, a few standouts where there's 3 Sutton kids that made the Central Mass All-Star team. Nick Licurdo, Matt McGreevy, and Ethan Gear. And Matt McGreevy is actually number 4 in the state of all the high schools for scoring,
Nice.
for points.
Wow.
So, you know, it's good to see that, you know, that they're working hard as a team, and, you know, something good and positive at the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
Is always good. So that would be my one round table announcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And not meaning to say anything negative about the other kids, but I've known Mr. McGreevy for many and many years, and he is a great kid, so phenomenal athlete. So it's nice to hear that he's leading the way statewide, so that's excellent. Congrats. All right, I have two thanks, I have a congratulations, and of course I have the typical food pantry list. First, I'd like to thank the Knights of Columbus. This is the Lenten season, so Friday afternoons from around 4:30 until they run out, they're doing their weekly fish fry, and I'll tell you, they hit it out of the park last week. It was the best that I've ever had, so if you're looking for a good meal, Friday nights, right at St. Mark's Church. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Dudley Gendron for hosting a super meat raffle. And I only mention this because the beneficiary of this super meat raffle was the Sutton Fire Department. From what I understand, and I'm not going to say any monies because I'm not quite sure because they're still counting when I had to leave, but records were set. The whole hall was packed, and I was separating the tickets, putting them into the drum, so my hands were getting numb separating the tickets. So it was a success all around. So thank you to everybody in not only our community, but the neighboring communities who came out to support our fire department. And speaking of the SFD, I would like to congratulate the Sutton Fire Department Honor Guard. In the midst of the meat raffle, there were representatives from both the state and the National American Legion, in particular the Department of Massachusetts POW and MIA Committee. And they presented our honor guard, the Sutton Fire Department Honor Guard, with a certificate of recognition for their, as it was labeled on the certificate, for their patriotic service. Now, from what I understand, I heard this from one of the state leaders, was that whenever the Sutton Honor Guard is called, they respond. They sometimes have a hard time getting military, actual service honor guards to special events. But yet, whenever they call Sutton, our honor guard is there without any questions, without any hesitation. So the fact that, again, we have a local group that's recognized at the state level speaks volumes to all the participants that work for our town. So thank you, Honor Guard, for the hard work that you do. Lastly, food pantry, a relatively short list. This is still winter time, even though it was 70 degrees today and almost short weather. Michelle put in a request, usual for hearty soups, canned meats, syrups, preferably the low sugar options, juices, chicken broth, soaps, and detergents. All right, we are not going to be adjourning. I'd like to make the announcement. We instead are going to be going to executive session. And this executive session will involve discussion of strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if any open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. I'd also like to mention that we are going to come back into open session only for the purpose of adjourning. Now, in order to do this, I'll need a roll call vote. So why don't we start off with John?
John Hebert, aye.
David Hall, aye.
Michael Kenny, aye.
Jesse Lemanik, aye. I'd like to declare the public session closed.